And we are live. We are live. We are live. I'm just checking our places and our spaces, making sure that everything is all good here. And we shall see if that is indeed the case in about a second.
Cool.
But let's see. Wait for a few people. All right. So we are live on Facebook. I see that. I mean, on YouTube. My brain don't work. Um, but we're live on YouTube. Are we good on Facebook? Are we good on Facebook? Let's see. We are live on Facebook. All good, all good. Very interesting. All right. And we're definitely 100% live on Clubhouse. Um, and he is praying to God that the AirPods last as long as we need them to,
Right.
because that is the new problem of the day. Um, but we're good. All right, all right. Um, yeah. So let's send out some final pings. I'll send out some. I'm sending out some final pings, some
Nice.
final little messages to people. Let them know that we here. Uh, letting them know that we here. I'm even letting Lara know. I know it's Lara's birthday, 35.
It is. Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
He's a good
So
friend.
he's a good friend, and I'm messaging and reaching out to the friends that I got on here so they could jump on in and listen. You got way more friends on this app than I do. Let me tell you. You named mad people, and I'm like, nope. So I don't know if I should feel some kind of way or not, but I'm gonna throw this in our chats. Oh, Yandra just joined in as a listener.
Hey,
A1 J1.
let's go. She's there for you.
Yeah.
Yandra. Fire.
If you're on Clubhouse, thank you for being here. If you're watching on Facebook and you're watching on YouTube, fun fact, you can actually talk in the chat, and I can see all of that, and I can respond to it. Um, and I could, say a few things, uh, and ask David a few questions if you got any. Um, so that's a cool thing. Also, I sent out, I think, the last messages that I could shoot out. Rebecca just pulled up in the building.
Hey.
Um, let's see. I, all right, all right, all right. Let's get it. Let's get it on and popping. People will jump in as they jump in. Um, so David, we here.
Yeah. Here we are.
We talked about this a bunch of times, so it's actually pretty cool. Um, but we here on Clubhouse with this crazy jerry rigged situation in my room and yours.
Hmm.
For for all of y'all who can't see, I was gonna say for those of y'all, but for all of y'all who can't see, let me give you a picture. In my room right now, I have a bunch of stuff connected to the computer so that people could hear me, can hear David, and probably at a higher audio quality, and we can retain the audio for later use. And to be honest, I don't think I needed all of this. I accidentally came up with a workaround by accident. That wasn't the workaround that I found.
It wasn't the workaround that you needed. It's the workaround you
No.
deserved. Christopher
Exactly.
Nolan.
And David has his AirPods in his ear, and then he also has another pair of headsets on his ear connected to the computer so that people on Facebook and YouTube can also listen in. To be honest, do we know if the audio is coming through? Do we know if it's working? Not really. But we're going to see at the end of everything.
If it all worked out.
And that's just what you gotta do sometimes. That's what you gotta do sometimes. You gotta do what you gotta do and pivot when you need to. And in that same spirit of pivoting, I just wanted to jump right on in. We talked about on the little Instagram caption that we jump on here and talk about friendship and friends. And we joked because wow, there goes our neighborhood friends throwing fireworks. So forgive us as you hear some of that in your ears. Um, it's 7:05. That's nuts. We talked about how David does not, cannot stand. He does not like the show Friends,
No.
and so I had to make sure that I named this with the word pivot in it, um, just for him. But we talking about a little bit of that, but mostly after this year of isolation, what does friendship look like now, right? Because
Mm.
I think that for our age group, and I mean, man, for my age groups, to be honest, the more I talk to more people, friendship is a really difficult terrain. I feel like it's harder to be friends with a person than it is to get in a relationship. And
Yeah.
so mad people don't know what it is that they need to do to have a friend, to keep a friend, to love a friend, to make more friends, to be a good friend. What it's like having a bad friend, like they can't even name those. And I just thought that the few conversations that I've had with David before just showed that he has some really great insight here, and in regards to what friendship could look like. For those of you who don't know, on YouTube and Facebook, David is my best friend. If you thought you were my best friend, I'm sorry. I never told you that. But I'm glad you thought it and you love me that much. But David is my best friend. I love him very much. And oftentimes when we look at our friendship, we can't even say what was the chemical X that made this come about. But I think that we have a pretty good grasp on what the other person is like and how to be friends with each other. So I thought it'd be really cool to kind of just talk about some of that, how
Yeah.
our what our friendship looks like, what the friendships outside of just this friendship looks like, um, and what does it look like for friendships to be fulfilled in Jesus Christ. And if you're listening to this, you jump on in wherever it is, and you're not a Christian. I just want you to know that still, even so, there's information here that you can walk away with that's gonna really be helpful to you in a year where you're coming out of isolation. So, David, preliminarily, how what are your feelings? How you thinking? How are you feeling before we jump on into this topic?
Yeah, I think the few things is friendship specifically before, mid COVID, and after COVID is just an interesting topic. I know a lot of people who throughout the pandemic either lost friends for a few reasons. One, it was the isolation. You just weren't unable to see people, and that led to the end of a friendship, so it kind of phased out. For other people, it was the lack of real support when everyone was going through it might have revealed to someone that this person isn't actually a good friend to have. Or on the flip side, people might have actually made friends in the middle of COVID. I know a few people, actually including myself, who because we were online playing PlayStation, right, and playing Call of Duty, I actually made a few friends through the pandemic. So how the pandemic relates to friendship, I think, is an interesting thing that we could chat about. But also, what friendship looks like in our generation specifically, because I do think that we're in the middle of a cultural moment where a lot of core definitions that have held, I would argue, humanity throughout centuries is now shifting and changing with things like the invention of the internet and social media, with changing ethics, right? The way that people understand what friends are, what they're for, the way that people understand who they are and how they fit into the world has implications on what friendship is and how deeply people care about it, how changes in the family, right, in the nuclear family, have impacted friendship, I think. It changes a lot. right? It changes a lot about how we think about friendship, the role of friendship, how easy it is or how difficult it is for people to engage in meaningful friendships. I think all of that has impact. So the question for me, honestly, is where do you want to start? There's a lot to do, lots to talk about here.
I mean, let's be real. Let's talk about um our isolation experience with all our friendships. Because I mean, right before, like literally right before, now I can't even say right before COVID started, but right before we took COVID serious,
Hmm.
um, we were all chilling at the evil twin spot, getting coffee, chilling there in the mornings, like a lot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We were just like, let's hang out because don't nobody gotta go into work. Don't nobody gotta go do nothing else. Let's just hang out here. Let's do this. Um, and to the point that we even started chilling at the house so much that mom was like, yo, y'all gotta find a place to go. All right. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I can't just be coming to my house, having a little everyday get together.
Right.
So it was really wild. And then they hit us with the quarantine. And we were like,
Right.
oh nah, we can't actually chill with each other. We stuck in the house. So let's talk about that moment. Let's talk about that pre-COVID entering into it, kind of like that one little week, how all that felt, like how our friendships felt right there, and then kind of from there we'll jump into how it felt when we could only be friends with each other in the house, but we were sick.
Right. So there were a few men that we were meeting with, who, some of which, I mean, obviously it was like an open thing. It was never like this exclusive group of whatever, but it was, if you heard about it, then you could come through. Right. We would meet at Evil Twin on Thursdays, in the mornings before people had to go to work, and it was awesome. It was really edifying. We'd get coffee and we would just talk about whatever was on our mind, right? Whatever was happening in ministry, whatever was happening in our relationships, whatever was happening, in the church that we were attending at the time. And it became a really revitalizing space. There was little, yeah, there was little, it was a place where we were built up. We also actually, it started out, wasn't it? Talking to Israel about his sermon. And we had
Yeah,
invited a few people just to talk about what it means to write a sermon or whatever. And it grew from that to just talking about all areas of life. And what was cool about it is that it was a rhythm. There was something natural about it because it wasn't like this programmatic, we're forced to kind of be together thing. It was, hey, you can come through, come through. There was also an element to which it was exclusively inclusive, right? So it was meant for people to just come and chill. It wasn't an escape really because it's not like we were doing some activity that like put our mind or focus on something else, but it was, something that allowed us to bring whatever it was to the table in a way that wasn't meant to hurt people or wasn't meant to make people feel uncomfortable, but it was meant to talk about, to bring life to, right, to answer questions, all that stuff. And it was an awesome space. Then when the pandemic hit, we couldn't meet, and you and I specifically got sick. So because we
yeah.
got sick, I mean, we weren't really talking to each other because we were COVID stricken, and then everything happened with Pop, where we had to take him to the hospital, and then the trauma surrounding that. But um, that whole friend group kind of disbanded. Now, like we
So
would
deep.
talk, right? We would talk to each other in a different context, right? So we would really be reached out to check in on Pop or to see if we needed food. And obviously, really important and awesome and loving, right? That they were there for us. We weren't like catching up in real casual ways. We grew other friendships in the pandemic, right? Again, through Call of Duty or through Zoom or whatever. But that friend group really stopped meeting. Then,
So
I
deep,
mean,
so
obviously,
deep,
we're
so
still
deep.
we're still in the pandemic, but now we're kind of rekindling what some of those friendships looked like. But ultimately, the rhythm of meeting every Thursday is what kept that alive and what helped us to notice that, wow, we're friends. Like this is, there was no power dynamic, right? So it wasn't like one person teaching everyone else. It wasn't, one person was cooler than everyone and we all wanted to surround that one person, right? It was a bunch of equals who came together to talk about where we were, who we were, how we're changing, all that stuff. But the pandemic, I think, did put a strain on what that was because that rhythm was now gone. And that
I
had a
hear that.
huge impact. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what's crazy about that time too is that I feel like right now we have never come back to that.
Mm-hmm.
Like right, like I mean, at least for me, I feel
No,
like we
no.
have never we have never come back to that. Like because part of our friendship story is also like our church story. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we went from doing that on Thursdays, right? Like we just joke, call it Theology Thursdays, because we were just talking about sermons, and then eventually we just started talking about everything we thought about God. It was nice. It was really dope.
Right.
But we never came back to that level of excitement, which I think also is because like that happened towards the pandemic stage because everybody didn't have to go into work for like 2 weeks.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it was lit. We were really
Yeah,
excited.
at first it was
Now
really
we all
dope
getting
because,
shoved
yeah.
back in.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that's part of that. So I love that. I like what you were talking about. There, just talking about how even for as we ended up stuck here and sick, the way the friendship looked here was interesting, right? Because you across the wall from me right now. You were for the whole pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it was still like wow. The fact that that could get stronger is mad weird.
Yeah.
Uh, but is also really interesting what like life being slowed down does or did to our friendships,
Yeah.
you know. So now what I want to talk about is what do you think the slowing down did for people in their friendships? Like it could be good, it could be bad, because I know it's different for everybody. But that slowing down, like kind of, you can't even really count the beginning, because the beginning, like we had like little to no choice
Yeah.
about getting outside. But when things are starting to get, 4 or 5 months in, and I think we had a few people who would pull up to the front every now and again at
Mm-hmm.
that point. But still, we didn't see a lot of our friends. Most of our friendship was on Call of Duty at that point.
Yeah.
Um, like what? Let's talk about that part and what you think about friendships in that space.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of friendships ended from what I've seen. And by that, I mean they were contingent primarily on some kind of life rhythm. So whether that
Interesting.
was we work together, we go to church together, we play basketball, whatever it is, a lot of them ended because that habit was no longer happening. So I know even for myself, there are a few people that I could say I was friends with, whether they were close or whether they're not close, whatever. And because we were no longer in a rhythm, and it required a certain level of intentionality to maintain that friendship since that rhythm was gone, neither of us gave that attention that would be necessary in order for that to continue. So it just kind of fizzled out. And that's something I noticed happened to a lot of friendships. But at the same time, um, the pandemic wasn't the only thing that happened during 2020. There was a lot of political um, backlash and conversation that happened given the murder of George Floyd and a few other race inspired incidents. So the question of things like systemic racism and injustice and whether it's real or not, the questions of critical race theory, right, came to the fore, specifically if you were in the church world, right, because the question was, are we going to adopt um, this system of thinking or are we not? Is it biblical? Is it unbiblical? Right? And those questions, whether you were close to them or not, um, ended up dividing friendships in a lot of spheres. A lot of spheres. I have a lot of friends who are in college who um, were huge proponents of Black Lives Matter and of other justice organizations, and other friends who were either vehemently against or rather neutral on the issue. And a lot of those friendships ended because of both the isolation, the lack of real communication that wasn't centered around an event, as well as this polarizing um, political, emotional, religious issue in some ways. So 2020, I think, separated a lot of friendships, but in other ways, right, helped reinforce friendships. So I know for me, I grew closer to some people because when Pop was sick, they came through and they really supported us and our families. And I realized, wow, this person really loves us. So I invested more into that friendship, right? But ultimately, one thing that I think 2020 helped to do is it helped us to talk about or to find interest in what is the nature of friendship? What does it mean to be friends with somebody? Right? What is friendship? Um, so really quick, I don't mean to derail the conversation talking about 2020, but what do you think friendship is?
Man, that's a good question because I'm so particular
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to that kind of stuff. Was good Sasha, was good West just joined us on Clubhouse. Love seeing you guys here. Funny enough, Wes is another person that I consider like crazy close to me as a friend. Um, but I think that to answer your question, I would say that friendship is like in its the least cute version of what people will call it. Uh, it's a contract that we kind of sign with our actions. Um, and the 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 kind of friend you are is subject to the kind of actions you sign. Feel me? On
Right.
the dotted line. So like when people are consistent, when they're loyal, not loyalty that's like yes man loyalty, like loyalty that's like, yeah, I'm with you. I'm gonna let you know when you wildin', but I'm not gonna let somebody from the street just come up to you telling you wildin'. Now they wildin' because I don't know who this person is. You
Right.
know, like it's definitely this thing I still have from growing up that if you are connected to me in some way, whatever ways we butt heads, whatever way we kind of work through things together, that's our way. But anybody from the outside is never gonna do that. So for friendships, to me, it has to do with a lot of protection, loyalty, love, and supremely for me, consistency.
Hmm.
Consistency to me is the chemical X of friendship. There is no Powerpuff Girls without consistency. Like it's not happening.
Right.
And so I would say that I would say to give an example, with you, you have been my most consistent friend in like the last decade of my life that I
Yeah.
could name. Like the most consistent through every single thing that has happened. There has not been a moment in which that consistency has wavered, right? And then you throw in somebody like Wes, who I'm glad is on with us right here. Me and Wes had the rhythm of working together. And so
Hmm.
we did a lot of things together because we were both Christians at the job, and it was dope to have somebody who thought like me at work. But that turned into let's get coffee at my house.
Right.
Let's hang out with each other's families. Let's do this. Let's do that. And we are very different. Me and you, and me and Wes, very very
Right.
different. But in those differences, we were able to come to a place where the consistency, the care, and I feel like that protection and loyalty piece for sure, definitely came up in a way that said, "All right, this is my boy. I'm not going nowhere at all
Cool.
for the length of this person's life. I'm pulling up."
Cool.
So for
So
me, is
so
that.
right. So what I'm hearing from you is that for your definition of friendship is that there is a contract of love between you and the other person. So when you
Yep.
spoke about um, not just doing the not just a yes man, right? You're talking about seeking the good of the other person, which is right. I think a good definition of love, right? You're seeking the highest good for another person.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a contract to do that between you and the other person,
Yeah.
right? Or the Bible would talk about that, right? Hypothetically, right? As a covenant, right? An agreement between two people that says, "I will give you this, and you will give me this." All right, and then together we uphold this agreement together. Um, right, I think clearly, I think that's a really good definition of friendship. Um, it's not a definition though, and I think 2020 has proven that it's not a definition of friendship that I see a lot of people in our world holding to. I think that there is a flippancy with friendship. I think that there is an image of what friendship should be or what they want it to be that makes it less pure in some ways and overly spiritual in other ways, which I'll talk about in a moment. But I think that, quite frankly, what 2020 has shown me is that in some ways I've held really unhealthy views of what friendship is, but generally, a lot of people, specifically in the age range of like 18 to 30, right, have also held on to a really unhealthy view of what friendship is, how to maintain it, and what the end of friendship should be. Like, so what's the goal of friendship? Um, so to answer your question from before about 2020 and how um, that impacted us, I think that the isolation really helped to illuminate what our definitions were. And for some people, friendship began and ended with a convenient relationship between two people where we have similar interests and where we're both taking from the other, right? So it ended up being you would stay friends with somebody if I received um, I received something, and if I'm receiving something, I stay in this relationship.
Yeah.
And you saw that, right? So then when isolation
OD.
happened, right? Like when someone, let's say when a family member gets sick and no longer, they can no longer participate in a rhythm with you. Now that friendship would be called into question because I'm not receiving from whatever this relationship is. Right. So
Yeah.
that's one thing I noticed, at least in the cultural narrative, and that's where we see often on social media a lot. The talk around cutting friends off. Right. When is the point where this friendship is no longer beneficial for me and therefore I should end it? Right. And that's another complex conversation, I think. But um, yeah, what are your thoughts? I don't want to rant too much.
Nah. You said it. You said it best. I think part of why we even wanted to have this conversation, is because this is one of the many topics that we talk about when we just kind of like in passing, when we get a chance in the middle of all the craziness of church planting and life. We always end up talking about, yo, like, bro, what does it really mean to be friends, or and some of the other ones we got on deck. Um, and I think that you're right. Something that we've concluded a lot of times is that people have an unhealthy understanding of what friendship is, and I think that's because people have come from really unhealthy relationships in the past, whether it be with their family or with their significant others, but also because they have unworked through understandings of like
Mm,
expectations and the reality of what certain things bring to their life. So uh in that alone, you really end up with a lot of issues. And so I think that when we're talking about using the word unhealthy in regards to friendship, is because we believe that friendships can bring health and
mm,
they can bring a level of value and help to your life. But when you put them where they don't belong necessarily, it starts to get really wonky. And I know for me, in like the last 2 years, friendships with different people have significantly changed.
mm,
And after the pandemic, oh my goodness. I mean, I
yeah.
could shout him out right now. He's not even here. But Justin, I
Mm-hmm.
was not friends with Justin before the pandemic. Nope.
Mm.
That was not somebody I really spoke to. I liked Josiah. You know, I pulled up because his son was really cool. He's a smart kid. I like smart kids that like listen. And I was like, what
Right.
a great kid. I like this. They did a good job
Right.
so far. I like it.
Right.
Uh, uh,
Yeah.
and then when we started playing Call of Duty, and I found out he was funny.
Right.
And I was like, oh, this dude don't be talking. He's mad funny. And then as we continued to go, it was just one of those friendships that was like, like this dude's here, consistent. We would text, we would talk. And then I become even closer friends with his wife, Christine. And as we continue to do that, like that just kind of stuff happened without a lot of pressure.
Right.
It was like if you pulled up, great. If you didn't pull up, great. And I miss that because I feel like a lot of times the way you become friends is the way that you'll stay friends in a healthy way. But
Yeah.
what ends up happening in life, I think we all do it, and I raise my hand first to say that I definitely do it, is that you go from all the really easy and organic ways that you were just friends to like this almost uh it's like when you go from the talking stage to being like exclusive with somebody. Like it feels like that happens in your
Mhm.
friendships. Like now you my girl. Now it's
All
not
right.
just we talk. So like I feel like sometimes in friendships it's like, yeah, this was cool and it was chill. Then we put like a really rough label on it, and now if I don't pull up every Wednesday, every Thursday, like I did when we didn't have to do nothing because the world was closed, then oh now I'm not your friend. Oh now I'm not pulling up. And I feel that way even about friendships I had prior to like the pandemic. Like there's friends that I still have not chilled with the way I did before the pandemic, and not that I
Yeah.
haven't tried,
Yeah.
but there's like this stuff like you said, like with the usefulness, I've either outlasted my usefulness for them.
Hmm.
I'll be honest and talk about the reality of me. They not necessarily useful to me right now, and I'm doing
Yeah.
a lot of other things. So I'm like, a priority list. I got to take care of these people. So
All right.
like a lot of that stuff kind of intermingle all together. Definitely leads to like this level of unhealthiness because I think at base it's just a really bad set of expectations in our
Yeah. No,
group of people.
I agree. Right. So, it's been what, 25 minutes that we've been talking already?
OD
Yeah.
30.
So I need to bring in scripture. So,
Let's get it.
the I think one of the clearest, because there are a few examples. One of the clearest friendships that we see in the Bible is David and Jonathan. Right. The classic description of friendship. It's found in 1 Samuel, starting chapter 18, only a few verses, but it describes their friendship like this. Reading from the ESV: as soon as he finished speaking to Paul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul.
Yeah.
And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of his robe that was on him and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt. And David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him, so that Saul sent him over the men of war. And this was good in the sight of the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. So just a short few couple of verses, but we notice a few things, right? That um, Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Right? So clearly, this is a deep connection, right? Soul doesn't just describe like the spiritual aspect of a person, although it incredibly includes that, right? But it's talking about all of my being, right? I was knit to this person, which this level of connection biblically is only seen in really two places. One is in marriage, the other is in family, right? The two closest possible. Um, it's describing an incredibly intimate relationship between you and another person, right? Clearly, this isn't a marriage relationship, right? Because we know a ton of the context just wouldn't allow for that, specifically the sexual ethic. But what we see is these two men who are in a deep and committed relationship. But it doesn't stop at a soul knit, right? We see later on in verse 2, right, or rather verse 3, that a covenant is made between the two. A covenant, which goes back to that agreement that we were talking about before, an agreement for the betterment of the other person, right? So the relationship is contingent on the fact that I want the good for the other person that is my friend, and the other person wants my good, which is a small distinction from what I think is the cultural narrative, right? Where the hinge of the relationship is what can I get from the other person? How do you tell the success of a relationship? I tell the success of the relationship by how much I'm receiving from it. Am I receiving counsel? Am I receiving resources? Am I receiving like street cred? Like, do we hang out and do we post it on Instagram? Am I receiving prayer, right? Even if you make it the best possible things, prayer, right? Does this person support me? all of these things, right? Our culture tends to judge the health of a relationship based on how much I'm receiving from it, when what I'm seeing here in the making of a covenant is something radically different. But is the covenant of me giving and the other person giving to me being maintained, and that being the health of the relationship? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
it
like,
certainly does.
right. So how do I know that we're successful as friends? The way I know that we're successful is that I'm worried about you, Io, and you're worried about me. Right? Like, I think the reason I think that's a key distinction is that if you're not worried about me, our friendship is not working, right? Which answers the tension that comes from when people feel like they're in a one-way friendship, right? Because a
Yeah.
lot of us have friendships like that, right? Like, where I don't get anything from this person, right? We're in two different places in life, so there's not really too much that they can offer me in regards to experience or empathy. We don't really connect on um, any common interest, right? So we're not really connecting in regards to skill. They don't like give me anything because they can't or they won't or whatever. I think that tension is answered in a non-selfish way, in that the covenant that we have with one another says that you are to give to me in order for us to maintain this. So it's not healthy if you're not giving, but I'm not upset because I'm not receiving necessarily. I'm upset because our covenant is not being maintained.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? And even in that covenant, it's not good for another person to not uphold a covenant. Right? So I think personally that reframes how we view friendships. Why? If I'm not receiving something from a friendship of mine, my next move is not just to cut them off. Instead, it actually thrusts me into deeper commitment to that person, because now my job as their friend is to help them to maintain the covenant that they made. Right? So what that turns into is conversations like, "Yo, you're not showing up for me."
Yep.
Right now, I'm pushed to have conversations like that because my job as their friend is to help them to maintain the covenant. These are the needs that I have. You haven't met any of them. Right? And now I'm able to actually judge what the success of that friendship is. Um, but ultimately, in COVID, what I've noticed is a lot of friendships have fallen away because they weren't working to maintain a friendship which again doesn't have to be like formal. The way that it happens in the Bible, where Jonathan takes off his clothing and his armor and he gives it all to David as a symbol of the covenant that they're making together, um, doesn't like it doesn't. We don't need to do that. You and I have never had a covenant ceremony, right? Like, I
No,
haven't
it's
done
a
that with you.
lot.
Right, that's I don't think we need to make it that deep. But but I do think that there is, to your point from before, expectations. What are we expecting out of this? Right, what do we think is going to happen? How far are we taking this? What does it mean
Yeah.
for us to be friends? What does it mean to be a friend to you? Right, so I think that that definition of friendship for me is very, very crucial. And it targets a lot of the problems. So, right, so yeah, again, the cutoff issue. But also, you mentioned what it's like to find a friend, to maintain friends. Um, we're talking about rhythms that you have, right? I think
Yeah.
a lot of people our age have a lot of trouble making friends, right?
OD.
Like, right, making a friend, right? I see people in the social settings. How does a person go from a stranger to a friend?
Yep.
Right, and you were talking about, I think it was a perfect example with Justin, right? Like, I've been friends with Justin for a while. Our friendship has grown deeper over the years, and I think is at its best it's ever been right now. But one of the reasons for that, you're right, and we've mentioned Call of Duty a ton, right? But was a shared interest that we had. Well,
Mm-hmm.
actually, hold on, let's actually back up. That wasn't a shared interest. You and Justin were not interested in Call of Duty at all. Um,
Not at all.
Right. I asked you guys to join me in playing this thing, and you're like, there's nothing else to do. Sure, why not? And we started playing that thing often, right? So actually, there was an accommodation that was made,
Mm-hmm.
right? There was effort that was put in to making something work because you had already committed to doing something for the other.
That's such a fact because Let me tell you, to this day, I only have Call of Duty still on my hard drive for y'all, and I don't
Right.
even play no more. But it's there because I know my boys play, and if I'm gonna get on, I'm gonna get on.
Right.
But literally, I like the game because I feel like I ended up in like Stockholm syndrome. Like I had to like the game. It caught me. I was trapped with it. Like like I did not want to play no first person shooter game that was not Destiny. But it's true. It's facts. That's literally why we ended up getting on. Because I was like, all right, it gives us something to do because we just going crazy in this house.
Right. All right. I think one part to mention, right, is something that allowed you to do that, because I think that one part that goes unmentioned a lot in regards to friendship is that, well, I think actually it's two things. I want to bring up this the C.S. Lewis quote from his book The Four Loves, when he's talking about friendship. He says, to the ancients, friendship seemed the happiest and the most fully human of all the loves, right? So when it came to family, when it came to marriage,
Wow.
when it came to all that stuff, out of all of those loves, to the ancients, right? So to ancient Hebrews, to the Greeks, to the Romans, all of them, friendship was the happiest and most fully human of all of them. He goes on to say, the crown of life and the school of virtue. Right? So this beautiful achievement that is adorned to you, and also a place where you learn how to be human, right? A school of virtue where you learn how to be. Then he goes on to say, the modern world, in comparison, ignores it.
Wow.
Right? Ignores the beauty and the value of friendship. Right? So like I I do think that our culture chases friendship. Like we want something, but we always, or often, I don't say always, we often fall short of that beautiful crown that C.S. Lewis is talking about. Um, and also this school of virtue, right? This place to learn how to be a good person or to follow virtues. Um, so like that's the goal, right? This beautiful thing. But I also think what's not acknowledged is the riskiness that comes from being a friend. It is a huge risk because you're
Holy.
risking hurt, you're risking reputation, you're risking time, you're risking money, you're risking your own emotional, mental health. You're risking a ton in being someone's friend. In those moments, in something as simple as Call of Duty, you guys are risking time. You guys are risking shame, right? Because you guys were engaging in a competitive game where now, if you are terrible at it, right, you feel shame. Um, skill, right? Like you have to now practice, right? So you have to put time into doing that. There's also an emotional thing, right? What if I'm really hurt if you guys reject it, right? So like, okay, now we have to do, right? You're risking a ton to be someone's friend.
Yeah.
Um, so in order to risk something, you have to have it.
Yeah.
So for a lot of people, and I think you could probably speak to this better, um, to become someone's friend is almost exhausting. It is like it is a sentiment that you loathe or that you can loathe, right? Because the idea of becoming someone's friend is just like, oh, I'm gonna have to give up so much. And I don't know if I actually have all of the things necessary to make a friendship work. Like, I don't know if I
Yeah.
have the patience. I don't know if I have the emotional extending and stretching that it would require me in order to actually have a good friend. And for a lot of us, and I think you mentioned it before, who grew up in bad homes, having a foundation where I've been loved somewhere, and therefore I can risk rejection, I can risk emotional exhaustion, I can risk, again, finances is a real one, right? Some people aren't friends with other people because they don't have the money to keep up, right? And that's a whole issue on its own, right? Like I can't hang out every day, I can't go to a bar every weekend, I can't afford that physically, right? So it prevents me from being friends with people. All those
Yeah.
things though I can't risk because I don't have this base of my own. that's one thing I think is important to acknowledge, right? Like, what have your experiences with your family been? The place where you're supposed to find an unwavering love, a complete and total acceptance from people. I actually think it was Justin. Justin, I think it's Justin and Christine who were talking to me about two types of kids. Were you there for that, Io?
I don't think so.
All right, so there are two types of kids, right? Who they go to the playground, and you have the one kid who will go to a group of friends, or a group of kids who are there, and say, "Hey, can I play with you?" And the kids will tell him no or her no. And you have the one kid who will say, "Okay," and then try and re-engage in some way, whether that's asking again, whether that's not even asking and just kind of like jumping in and joining, right? And that's called social resilience, right? So they're just going to keep trying, and they're going to get rejected, and they're going to try again, and over time they'll get into that group. Right? There's social resilience. Then you've got another kid, right, who will timidly walk up to these group of kids at the playground, and, "Hey, can I hang out?" No, and will instantly walk away, and will try to play by themselves, and that'll be the beginning and end of that interaction. And in fact, they won't move forward in trying to interact with other kids because they remember that rejection forever and could
Okay.
never put themselves in that situation. Right? So you got this social resilience versus almost this social shame, right? That grabs someone. I bring up that example to say the one who's socially resilient tends to be someone who has a foundation where they are accepted. Therefore, if things don't work out with this person, right, it's okay. I have
I
my
got
family,
others.
right? So there's some people who who feel like they don't need friends, right? My mother is one of those people, who she has a ton of friends, so it's not like she doesn't have them, right? But she was describing she doesn't need a best friend. Why? I mean, she has her sister, she has aunts and uncles and other family members, right? She has she doesn't have people. She's fine, right? She has her husband, right? Like she doesn't need a best friend. But the reason I think that's important is all of us have to ask when it comes to the question of friendship, what is my foundation? Where am I coming from? What tools do I have? What tools don't I have that allow me to engage or not engage?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's not going to be equal for everyone. Some of us just naturally have like for me, I'm naturally really introverted, right? Like if not born into the family that I just so happen to be born in, right, I would not innately have some of the tools to be social. And by introvert, I do mean the technical definition of finding energy on my own, but meaning I wouldn't have the tools because I'd be exhausted all the time. Right. Also, do you have a community of people who love you regardless? Right. All those things I think are meant to consider. I went on a really long rant. I just realized.
It's all good. That's why we're here.
That's fair. I feel like there's a way that people can raise hands. Did we turn that off?
Nah, they could do it. It's on.
Okay. Well, let me encourage you if you're listening and you want to contribute something to the conversation. Either ask a question or give a comment. Feel free to raise your hand. I'd love to hear from you. Looks like someone did.
Yep. Here's what I will say. I do not know if your audio is gonna come through on the other pieces, but we still
Fair.
want to hear you.
That's true. So
Uh,
what I could do is I could repeat essentially what they're getting at for the
great,
other live stream.
great.
So
We'll throw that in there. Christine, she did not raise her hand. Oh, and then she gone for some reason.
never mind.
I was about to
She
add her.
left.
It
Well,
took
that
too long.
hurts. Yeah, I guess that hurts my feelings, but it's fine. I'm her friend, so I'll forgive her. But yeah,
Oh, they're back.
that oh,
Let's
there she
see.
is. Christine, are you
Christine, if
gonna
you want to raise
raise
your
your hand
hand
again?
again, you can. I don't know what just happened. TBH. But if you're trying to raise your hand to throw anything in here, let us know before we move on.
Yeah. The question of your foundation, right? So I mean naturally, right, that leads me to point out what it means to be a follower of Jesus, right? And how friendship is not only fulfilled in Jesus, but also sustained by Jesus himself.
Yep.
right? And what benefits we have as believers. John 15, for example, Jesus is speaking to the disciples. I believe at this point, Judas has actually exited the conversation. This is right after the Last Supper, where Jesus is talking about what's going to happen. He says this: "No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you." So here, for the believer, the one who is accepted, who has accepted Christ's message, right, accepted the gospel, received him by faith, by his sheer, through his sheer grace, right? Jesus is the friend of every single believer, right?
Yeah.
The friend of every single believers. And what does that mean? Proverbs 18, I think, gives some clarity too. A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother, right? So in this definition of what a friend is, they stick closer than even family. That covenant that was made between Jonathan and David, is made between you and Jesus in the covenant of grace, right? That relationship between you and him. So Jesus is utterly committed currently to us as believers. Right? He's committed to us. John 15:14, right? Right before that verse I read before. "You are my friends if you do what I command you." Right? So our relationship to Jesus is one of doing, right? Obedience to Jesus, which comes again through the Holy Spirit. We can have that conversation later. Right? Jesus is claiming to be our friend. He's our friend. That's one of the ways through which Jesus relates to us. He relates to us as our King, as our Savior, as our Master, as our Lord, and as our friend.
Great.
Right? As our friend, which means what? He's there for us. He's closer to us than a brother. He listens to us. He gives to us. Right, and he's already done a lot of these things through the cross, right? But through the Holy Spirit, he continues to do these things. He continues to minister. He continues to comfort. He continues to give us wisdom and advice. He continues, again, to provide for us times of intimate connection, right? Through the reading of his word, through prayer, through worship, all these things. Jesus is our friend, but he says specifically in verse 15 that the main way he has called us friends is that he has made known to us what we have heard from the Father, what he has heard from the Father, right? So there is this knowing of him, the fact that we are in intimate relationship where we can know who Jesus is and where truth is revealed to us, again, primarily through scripture, where because all of that is revealed to us and known to us, we are friends of his. So if you're a believer, regardless of what your family situation has been, regardless of whether or not you found yourself in communities of love and acceptance, and whether or not you were given this base from which you can trust other people and love other people and give to other people emotionally, whatever, right? If you're a believer, you have been given a new and perfect friend who is always there, who always values you, who has already and is perpetually reaching out to you. So Jesus being our friend, right, now leads us to be able to have friends, to be able to do so with complete and sustaining efficacy. Like I always can. I can always love my friends and be in covenant with my friends because I am constantly being loved by Jesus perfectly.
Great.
Right? So we have this different relationship. So there's a lot of exhaustion. And The concept again of cutting friends off, I think, comes when people are genuinely exhausted in their friendships, right? Again, they're not doing anything for me, but that relationship of I'm not receiving anything, therefore I won't be your friend, is curbed a lot when you are being sustained by Jesus. I need less of my friends. I'm less of a burden to my friends when I'm sustained by Jesus. And I see that often. Also, Jesus is our model for friendship, right? He sustains us, he gives us friendship, but he's also a model for friendship. What kind of friend is Jesus? John 15:13. Greater love no one than this, that someone lay down their life for his friends. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. Meaning what? Ultimately, Jesus is the best friend because he has laid down his life for us. And what does
That's
it
why
mean to be someone's friend, right? To love, to do what is best, to will what is best for another person. It's ultimately to lay down our lives for people, to give up what we want.
you know what I think is so interesting right there is that given all the stuff that we mentioned and we referenced before, um, that right there, if people could grasp it, they'll be able to change all their friendships. Because if you're the kind of friend that would legitimately, not in a way that you do it just so you could count it later or complain about it later, but a friend who legitimately will lay their life down for another friend, and then that friend is laying their life down for you. You
Mm-hmm.
keep doing that. That's the church. That's like the whole thing. Like we continue to lay our life down for one another, we taken care of. Because
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, that change starts and ends with Jesus. And then you can have conversations with people who, they're not necessarily laying their life down. They on one knee or something.
Right.
They kind of crouched over. They're like, I ain't gonna lay all the way down. But I'm
Right.
gonna put my head. Like you can have conversations with people who are doing that, and that's the beauty about the relationships we get because of Christ is that we get to have the conversations about disagreement, about mistreatment, and reconciling with one another. Um, and that thing helps both ways because if you're not being taken care of, they're not laying down, and they need to lay down,
Right.
right? So being able to have those kind of conversations, I think is going to be really important. I want to ask you two final questions. We've been going for 57 minutes, and I want us to end soon because it's fire. I wanted it to be like an hour, and that's where we at. You have said some fire stuff. Let me tell you, I started taking some notes.
Thanks, man.
Um, but well, the two things I kind of want to ask from you is, and you could do them in whatever order makes sense to you. But if you had to summarize this talk, if somebody had to walk away, put it as a bumper sticker on their car, what would you say? And what are some tips, some practical steps that someone could take into their friendships as quickly as tomorrow, given some of
Mm.
what we said? What could someone do starting tomorrow to set their friendships in a healthy light? And what's the bumper sticker version of this whole talk?
Yeah, so I'll do the tips first because I need to think of like a pithy way to say it. So I'll like have that running as a background program as like I'm trying to give tips, I guess. Um, I'm I would be lying if I said I'm the best friend in the world. I'm not. I have a lot of places to grow in my ability to be a friend. Right. One of my biggest tensions, and obviously, I mean, hopefully, this space is a space where we can be honest, and I mean, hopefully, all spaces are places where we can be honest, honestly.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
I struggle because I don't feel love necessarily when I spend time with people. Right. That's not like the primary one for me. I
Hmm.
can love you and not see you for 6 to 8 months. Right? And like I'm genuinely fine. Like I'll see you in 8 months, be like, yo, I love tell me, catch me up in the past 8 months. We're here. Oh my gosh, I love you. Right. Like I don't. So bending the way that I feel and the way that I understand things has been a huge challenge for me. Because there will be some people who they do feel love that way, and that's okay, right? That's fine. But if I'm going to be a good friend, I need to lay down my life and lay down what I care about and lay down what I think, and accommodate that other person as they're doing the same for me, right? As they're giving me the grace to say, he doesn't not love me, right? He's just like fine, right? Like he's good. So I think the tips to employ. So I'll give that disclaimer. The tips to employ that I think have worked is first, just reach out to your friend. Simple. I think that there's a lot of shame in reaching out because there's a feeling of neediness. There's a feeling that I don't want to be overbearing. I think extending yourself and reaching out is helpful. Right? Super simple one.
Great.
Second is, I think something you mentioned is have a real talk about expectations. Yo, what does it mean for someone to be a good friend to you? I think whoever it is you're talking to is going to be bot because no one asks that question.
That's
But I
true.
think that's a good it's a good way to actually have a real talk. What does it mean for someone to be a good friend to you? And I think people should engage in those conversations often. If honestly for most relationships in general, whether they be romantic, platonic, whether they be family, whatever, asking people what does it mean is such a for me to be XYZ to you is such a useful question because
It is
from
my
there
favorite thing.
it's awesome. From there, I mean, you can go to scripture, right, where it defines what all of those relationships look like. Because what we'll come up against is that some of us, including myself, have unrealistic expectations as to what it means to be a friend. For me, one of my unrealistic expectations is that it's funny enough, it's actually the opposite, is that I don't have to expect anything from anyone. That's one thing I've been running up against heavy, right? That it's actually not good for me not to expect things from people. Like that's it. Right. Anyway, another talk, another day. Point is, having a real talk. What does it mean for us to be friends? I think another one that's real is tips for making friends. Be friendly. Be friendly. So what that means is extend yourself if you're in a new setting. This happens all the time in church, right? Where people don't know whether or not they should be someone's friend or how to make friends or whatever. One of the best ways is just to extend yourself, to reach out, to be friendly to other people, to be open, and to do things that other people like to do. I think the example of you and Justin being my friends by playing a video game with me is a phenomenal one. They want to play, let's go play, right? Like you're not good at it, right? Whatever. Because you're so secure in your relationship with Jesus, you're able to extend yourself in that way, right? So I think it's a good tip. You see, a lot of people like doing this one thing. Try doing that thing, right? It's not friendship is not magic, right? It's not. It's commitment. You're deciding to do this thing, so go do that, right? So reaching out to your friend, conversation, extending yourself. Um, let's see. Actually, that's 3. I like rule of threes. Is that good?
Yeah, I think that's great. Right. Actually, reach out to your friend. Have that hard conversation. I gotta tell you that is my favorite one. If you're
Mm-hmm.
my friend, ask me that, and have me ask you that. Like, it's one of my favorite things in the world because I am very like honest. So if you tell me, I'm like, I don't need all that. I just need this, and you tell me that, I'm like, I dead don't know if I can do all that. I gotta figure this out because it's hard. Like, my brain goes, how do I do all these different pieces? But it matters to me, and I put it where it belongs so that I can work through it. Because if I want someone in my life, I know I gotta do the work. So I'm like,
Right.
all right, I gotta work this out. The something's gotta give here. And then the last one, be friendly. That's absolutely true. You can't ask for friends and then you're not willing to talk to nobody. You're not willing to hey, my name is Ayo. How you doing? Like, you gotta be that kind of person. You gotta not be afraid of people, or what they're gonna do is
Right.
talk back.
Right.
Like, you know,
Or
eh,
also
eh,
be like, I think be hampered by accommodation. So what I mean is that like and a lot of people this can go really wrong. Like, so you see a lot in particularly like Southern culture where people are like false friendly, right? And I don't think anyone's talking about that in this
no.
context. But there are ways that we accommodate our personality so that we can not appeal to, but so that we can connect with someone else, right?
Yeah.
Some people are really harsh. So it's important to accommodate yourself in saying, okay, the way I'm going to accommodate to someone who's really harsh is by asking myself the question, what did they actually mean by that? By taking a moment to really interpret what that person is saying,
You
and
do that with
not
me.
holding malicious. Sometimes, right? Like where you're really passionate about a lot, and I'm aware that you're not malicious as a person, right? But you're just passionate. However, some of the ways that you can communicate initially usually communicate either hostility or anger or whatever, but I have to take a second because I'm your friend to accommodate my own personality, which is quick judgment and quick assessment, and say, okay, what does Io mean when he says this?
Mm-hmm. But that's
And
so
in
true
fact,
because I
yeah,
do the same thing.
mm-hmm,
Like
yeah,
because you're not as passionate as me, I'll be like, yo, like you, but I like care. Wake up,
right,
live.
right,
And
uh-huh,
like you'll be like, nah, I do care, but I'm processing, and that's one of my least favorite sentences that people say to me.
right,
I'm processing. I'm like, me too, but I'm talking. Can you process right now?
right,
And so like that, it's hilarious because we've been friends for so long that I don't even ask for that no more. Like half the time I'm yelling, you know what I'm saying,
right,
and then half the time you processing, I know he's putting some pieces together. So I'm gonna look at TikTok for a second, and he's gonna be done by the time I'm finished.
right,
Um, and I just be alright. And it's funny because outside of those spaces, uh, people might think that you just think really cold in a really cold way,
mm-hmm, oh,
and that you
200%,
don't care, and that's not true. The
no,
reason you're wasting your thinking space, that's because you
right,
care. And
right,
then for me, people go, "All right, you don't got to be so tight or freak out, like, chill." And
right,
I'm just like, "Nah, but I care about you, and this is my feelings. I don't know where to
right,
put it." So, I'm
right,
thinking at the same way you are, but that's just kind of how it comes out for me.
right,
And my some of my favorite friendships are the friendships that I don't have to continually remind them I'm not mad at you and I
right,
love you. This is I talk like this to my cereal.
right.
Like
Right,
it's
that's
not
real.
you.
That's 100% real because like it's a relationship of mutual accommodation, right? I'm
Yeah.
laying down my preconceived notions, or I'm laying down what I thought I heard, or what I feel, or I'm laying that down so that I can understand you. But that even happens in moments where there is real pain, right? Where you do say something that is actually offensive and intended to offend, right?
Yeah.
I now also have to accommodate by saying, okay, because I care about the covenant that the agreement that you and I have made to seek the well-being of the other person, what it takes for me to do that is to forgive. I have to now take on the weight of whatever offense and pay that debt. And I have
And
to forgive you.
tell me the truth.
Right, exactly. And tell you the truth about how that hurts. But I can only tell you the truth about that once I've forgiven you.
Yep.
Right, because then if not, then my telling you the truth about it has to do primarily with me seeking revenge or trying to get you to pay for whatever it is that you did. When no, I think you can only really reconcile with somebody, you can only really speak truth to somebody when you've already forgiven them.
Yep. I
Right,
agree.
so but again, that takes that level of accommodation. Um, Yeah, and like sometimes like we realize things socially. So for example, I know you struggle with this all the time where it's like, yeah, you come off as passionate. Sometimes I need to tone down my tone or else people don't hear what I'm saying. And you
Yep.
accommodate that.
Yes, I do.
Right, especially
I,
when you're
I
making
hate it, but I
friends,
do
right?
it.
Right. You don't start off hot, right? Like you usually like work up with them, right?
Yeah, let them
Um
learn as they go. Oh, he's a stove.
right. But you do that, right, to accommodate the other person because you think, hey, this person matters and they might matter a lot one day. Let me accommodate in this way. Speak to them gently and kindly, or whatever. But yeah, I don't remember what my 3 points were because I spoke a lot, but you know,
To reach out to your friend.
hmm
Ask them what does it mean to be a friend,
right?
and then to be
Be
friendly.
friendly. Nice. Thank you.
Yeah, those
Appreciate that.
those three. And then how you supposed to come up with the bumper sticker?
The bumper sticker.
Uh,
Okay.
if you had to say this is how you walk away from this conversation, other than the steps we just gave, but like slap it on the back of your car real quick. What would that be?
All right. I would say be a good friend
Fire.
because Jesus is your friend.
Be a good friend because Jesus is your friend. All right, we ending here, and Christine raised her hand, so I'm gonna see if this time it actually adds her. And I'm not sure if the audio will come through over here. Don't know how this is working, but we will just repeat whatever she says. But we're gonna toss her in right now on Clubhouse. Let's see. Christine, you should be able to speak if you just take your mic. Oh, but I'm
Hey,
somehow a speaker or something.
hey, you're turning somewhere in the car.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yep,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
good
It's
now.
cut off a little bit, but you good right now.
Nice. Nice. That's beautiful, right? Like that's such a I think it's so rich, right? There's a lot there. Primarily, yeah, primarily because um it speaks to having to have a relationship with Jesus in order to have friends, right? So you're
Yeah.
saying that the connection is necessary, which is a really bold claim that if you are not in relationship with Jesus, you cannot experience the most ideal and perfect form of friendship.
I would agree with that.
Like I think yeah, right. Like I think obviously they're like non-believers have friends, right? That's real, right? Of course they do. And of course there is self-sacrifice and there is right of course. But I think that the purest experience of that where both people are genuinely selfless and laying down their lives for one another cannot happen apart from Christ. Meaning that whole experience of what I think the Bible is giving us as ideal cannot happen unless you're a believer.
Yep.
Yeah, which is right.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's not
Yeah.
guaranteed by any stretch.
It's not guaranteed. So what
Right.
Christine was just saying for those of y'all on a separate audio channel, uh, in totality, if I had to put it real quick, it's just that, like, without Jesus, it's kind of hard to deal with the draining that could come from relationships, and you are guaranteed this level of re-energizing, refueling that will come from forgiveness and reconciliation in those friendships. Whereas when you don't have that, I don't think it's impossible, but let me tell you how hard it is to have a conversation with people that you disagree with and then think you're still gonna be friends when you don't have the tools of forgiveness and reconciliation the way believers do. It's incredibly difficult. I don't remember a lot of that that didn't cost a lot when I grew up, because it definitely cost a whole ton.
Mhm.
And I mean, because growing up with me was like, all right, we mad at each other, we gonna fight. I'm really glad that that's not the case right now, because I'm older and it's just like I'm tired. My body hurts as is. I'm not trying to fight every time I disagree. Um, but there's this, oh wow, I didn't realize I did that. My fault, And then we move forward into the beyond the my fault into the reconciliation. This is gonna take some time. It's gonna take some work, but we're gonna work to get back to a place like it was before, and we'll look at this in the past. And certainly other people can do that, but I agree with the idea that you will not experience the ideal, and you will not experience it in the fullness that can only exist with Jesus Christ and his influence in that matter. Because I mean, we selfish people. We want what we want, and even from our friends, we just want what we want. And it kind of just comes to that place sometimes. Um, yeah. So we've been going for an hour and 15 now.
Oh, nice.
Fire. Really, really nice. I like this. I like this, and I'm gonna find out how to get more of the voices from there onto here. I think there's some ways I could do that. Um, as I learn some of this, and as I call my resident genius Justin to figure this out. Uh, but yeah, if you've been here, if you connected with us at all today, thank you. Thank you for spending time with us to talk about friendship in 2021 at the point that we're at. Um, and if you're on Facebook or on your YouTube, um, I hope that the experience went well and that all the audio was clear for you and worked for you as best as possible. We will be doing this more soon. We have some other topics, and let me tell you, some of them is a little juicy. I picked the easy one up front. 'Cause we got some tough talks, some controversial topics. We want to talk through the stuff that people really be talking about in real life, not no pithy, funny things that just gonna get people on here. Because to be honest, he could be playing Call of Duty. I could be on the phone with different people. I could be chilling right now. But we doing this because we think that these kind of conversations, these safe spaces, need to be made more. And with all the technology that's available, we're gonna do it as much as we possibly can. With the time that we have, David, do you want to say anything before we go? Because I'm about to end it all right now.
Nah, I think that's it. You got it.
All right, so thank you guys. Thank you for being here. We'll put some more information the next time we coming on to Clubhouse directly on the Clubhouse and on Instagram as we go. David, thank you for jumping on and having this chat and really just helping us see how friendship can be fulfilled in Jesus, um, and talking through a lot of the things that you did today. Uh, Thank you guys. Love you guys. We'll see you soon.
Okay, peace.